This is Channel 4, and now follow the nation's health with Joan Shenton.
We have with us in the studio Dr. Peter Draper, Unit for the Study of Health Policy at Guy's Hospital. Brian Inglis, author whose most recent book, written with Ruth West, is called The Alternative Health Guide. Dr. Tony Smith, Deputy Editor of the British Medical Journal. David Williams, General Secretary of COSI, the Confederation of Health Service Employees. And David Kenny, Regional Administrator for the North West Thames Regional Health Authority. Let's look first at an example of the way unions and management were depicted, providing a strong subplot in the films. An important issue surrounds the sale of Nightingale Ward, a geriatric ward which management no longer wished to finance. The buyers, a group of Arab businessmen, want to turn it into a private gynecology and obstetrics ward, which would please consultant gynecologist Philip Montague, who wants to expand his private practice. The union representatives had opposed the sale, but concede when they're offered the reinstatement of overtime payments.
I don't think the strike would have benefited the membership. We got a result, all right. I think he had a few beers, Christian.
This second sequence underlines the complex issue of structured union grades for doing certain jobs which cause inflexibility in the mortuary.
You could use Ram on the incinerator, Mr. Needham, but he's only grade 3. And you can't have a grade 3 man incinerating limbs. That's a grade 4 job.
They all burn the bloody same, Chris.
You don't want to be so sure.
Well, can we make him up to grade 4 temporarily while Charlie Trollis is off sick?
You go back down to grade 3 when Charlie Trollis returns. That's hardly fair, Mr. Needham, is it?
I can't make him up on a permanent basis, Chris.
Then he can't take that responsibility of incinerating limbs.
All right, I'll find somebody else.
As long as he's grade 4.
David Williams, you represent 240,000 COSI members. What's your view of the way unions were represented in the films?
I think that the series indicated some of the issues that we are concerned about as trade unions, things like privatization, contracting out, cutting the cost and cutting manpower and things like that. But I think it was disastrously misrepresenting the local representatives in the way they were handling those issues. I think that staff and their representatives are very well informed on these matters, and their representatives in particular are very articulate in the way they deal with them with management. That did not come across, and I think you did the trade unions a disservice in that sense. Can I just refer to the clip for a second about the burning of the legs and things like that? That would never happen in real life because there is national agreement about the grading of people who do these things, and there wouldn't be local inflexibility such as was suggested on the film. It's a national agreement and there would be no haggling locally about it.
How do you view the present financial cuts to the NHS, totalling the loss of about 5,000 jobs?
This, of course, is a disaster, not just because we're concerned about job losses. We are concerned as trade unions with the service as such. And it is the effect upon the service and patient care that we are concerned about. And it is on the side of the patients that we've come in the campaign that we're having to try and stop them. And therefore, I think that this is a battle between the government and the patients, and the trade unions are coming in on the side of the patients.
But between 1979 and 1982, total NHS employment increased by 7%. So why isn't a 1% cut in expenditure possible if it's going to make the service more efficient?
The fact that you're cutting these, or the government is proposing to cut the staff, is not making it more efficient. I don't think you can possibly put these two together and say that that is making for more efficiency. What it's going to make, of course, is for a cheaper service. Now, we are saying, and that there are statistics to prove it, that by doing it in the way the government is doing it, it is not keeping pace with inflation, it's not keeping up pace with the development in technology, it's not keeping up with the changes in demography, and therefore it is not a question of increasing staff for increasing them sake.
Well, David Kenny, you are a regional administrator. David Williams says that the cuts that you have recently been implementing aren't making you more efficient. What do you say to that?
I think in some cases, making a cut forces one to address some long-standing problem. So in a very limited way, they could be said to be making us more efficient. But to take up David Williams' point, there's a much more general difficulty about making cuts in a health service in any country. It's not the same as in industry where one is closing down an old production line and bringing new ones on, nor is it the same as in education where the number of school children declining means that schools are in fact empty. In health, you open clinics, you open wards, you open beds, or you provide a laboratory service. And once it's provided, once that service is provided either for patients directly or for doctors, it will get used. Taking it away means that something is missing in the system and there's a pressure as a result of that.
But did you welcome an opportunity to streamline or slimline your region?
It certainly isn't. This is not streamlining. Streamlining sounds like a constructive exercise, and we could certainly streamline a number of our services and have been doing so and will continue to do so. The difficulty with cutting in the short term is that one doesn't have a chance to plan it properly, and therefore it tends to be, in a sense, limited sense, destructive.
How long can you go on cutting down? I mean, your region has the largest proportion of partial closures when compared with all the other regions. In fact, 20 partial closures and 749 consequent bed losses recently. I mean, how long can you go on doing that?
I'm not surprised that we have that high figure because we are, in relation to the other 13 regions in this country, relatively well provided. We're way above the average, and as part of government policy, with which we go along, albeit reluctantly, as part of government policy, we are having to cut back on our services faster than other regions. So that's an inevitable consequence of our position in the league table.
You're very well provided for some good reasons. You have a lot of teaching hospitals in your area that by historical and geographical accident have become centres of excellence and have provided some of the world's major medical advances. Now, is it fair of the government to be cutting across the board like this, arbitrary swathes in a sense?
I don't think these are arbitrary swathes. The point I'm making is that year on year, progressive cuts are difficult to handle, particularly if they're not planned. But to come back to your main question, it's vital that we keep the centres of excellence going in the same way as, although they seem to be almost going out of fashion, it is vital that the acute sector of medicine is kept strong and lively, because unless that is there with its clinical drive, the other services won't be able to draw on it. For instance, geriatric care needs to use those services directly. The therapists can come across from those services and work in the long stay.
You know, you've produced a way of doing the latest round of cuts. What about the future, the projections laid down by the government for the next 10 years? I mean, how do you see the next 10 years? Can you work to more cuts?
We're moving money in this country in three ways, from the south to the north, and in every region from the city centres to the outer suburbs and the shires.
Do you think that's right?
And in each district, we're moving it from the acute services to the non-acute. Yes, that is right. It is right. It's right to move it from south to north in the sense that I could not, morally or socially, accept a very wide differentiation between provision for the south of England and provision for the north. It's very difficult to do it without extra money coming in, but I think it's right that we should make those changes. What is difficult and very worrying is the long-term look ahead. It's now readily accepted by government and by the health professions that one needs something like 1.5% simply to stand still and provide the same volume and quality of care as one is doing at a given point in time. If we look 10 years ahead, one is thinking in terms of a 16.5% potential shortfall. This is rather like the Playtex girdle phenomenon. It can stretch in a number of ways, but if it doesn't go far enough, I assume the result will be rather ugly.
David Williams, the government is encouraging the contracting out of national health services like laundry, cleaning and catering. You're opposed to this. Why?
We're opposed to this because we don't think it's being done for the good of the service. It's being done, it's not being done to improve patient care. It is being done for political purposes and political purposes only. And therefore we think it's wrong. We also think it is wrong because it is a worsening of the service in many ways at greater expense. We have got examples like we had in Essex when there was a £1 million contract which was terminated there. because it wasn't giving value for money, and by returning to direct labour, we were saving £80,000 a year. A similar example was in Worthing when they saved £30,000 a year by going back to direct labour. So we are in a position where we can give a better service, a cheaper service, a more efficient service, a more committed service by having direct labour.
David Kenny, what are your views about contracting out?
I don't think administrators have many hang-ups about this. We would certainly contract out if there's a financial benefit. The American experience is that the benefits are not that enormous. There are some, but they're not enormous. I think we as administrators are more worried about the way contracting out is presented sometimes as a marvellous panacea. It can't be. Even the most optimistic, the wildly optimistic forecasts from the industries itself reckon that we can possibly get a 20% saving. Well, even if that were true, that is still only 20% of 20%. That's a 4% saving in the whole of the health service. We've spent that in just over 3 years.
One of the things that impressed me about your union's literature was the point that cleaners, domestic cleaners in hospital wards actually are part of the patient care, and that if it's private, that whole interrelationship between the sick person and the other person in the ward might go.
All our members are employed in the health service, and we are stressing the totality of care, and in order to provide that totality of care, you've got to put great emphasis on everybody's role within that therapeutic team, including the cleaner. And if you've ever been in hospital, you know how cheerful it is to have a good morning dear from the cleaner, or from anybody else who's giving you a cup of tea or anything like that, far more so than somebody who's got a knife or a hypodermic needle. And therefore, it is very important in our view. And also there's a question of the discipline of the team, which is important. And if you take that away, then you're taking something very valuable away from our health service as it now is.
Dr. Peter Draper, you have been studying health policy for some time. What comments do you have so far?
Well, I'd like to go on immediately from what David was just saying and remind you of what a former editor of The Lancet called the greater medical profession. He, Fox, rightly took the view that health is teamwork, and that certainly includes the cleaners, it certainly includes the porters and the cooks and so on. And I think currently we're seeing what can only be regarded as a spate of union bashing. It's actually very divisive and very doctrinaire and very unfortunate. I tend to think that the whole of the privatisation thing is something of a pot of gold at the end of the rainbow. It's being presented, David used the suggestion that it was a panacea. I'd go along with it. It's been presented as though it's going to sort of solve all the money problems. It's just rubbish. The health service actually has a lot of hard experience of contracting out, and I can assure you that if there were these pots of gold, we should have used them years ago.
Do you think the NHS is in real danger of disappearing?
No, not of disappearing, but it is certainly being damaged at the present time. I think perhaps the simplest way to describe that is that the glib generalisation from people who don't know much about the organisation is that, oh, we're only cutting away fat. I think that's a misleading picture. Think of it much more as somebody chopping off 1% of the body, and that includes a toe here, and a finger there, and a jab at an artery there, and so on. Because the effect of suddenly, out of the blue, chopping this off the budget, suddenly saying, right, we're now going to cut manpower, the effect of that is to wreck long-term planning.
But the justification for the chops is always that it's going to make it more efficient, and that it isn't efficient enough.
Just rhetoric, just rhetoric. I don't know anybody in the health community who isn't interested in good organisation and better organisation. People who bleat all the time about more efficiency, and we're doing this to improve management, sometimes need to be seen as people with a very bad track record. And Conservative ministers particularly, actually, if you look back at the 74 reorganisation, Keith Joseph, that was all to bring good management to the health service. There's a bad track record of talking efficiency and actually doing things that make good management more difficult.
Dr. Tony Smith, you are an ex-doctor and a journalist, deputy editor of the British Medical Journal. What was your general view of the nation's health films?
Well, I'm going to talk about a rather different angle because I think the doctors who've commented so far in this and earlier programs have really been too kind. In many ways, I think these films were a dangerous sort of caricature of reality. What they had to say about doctors and nurses and health workers, the pictures they painted, were not unreasonable. We've all seen people like that in the health service. They were a bit extreme. But the picture that was painted of disease itself was, I think, quite false, very negative, and really rather frightening. And this matters because these programs must have been watched by a large number of people who've themselves got or think they've got serious diseases. And what they were told was that if they got cancer, it may very well be their own fault they've got cancer, and if they go to hospital, the treatment they'll be given is not going to be very effective and will be rather nasty. And they've been told that if they're going to have an operation, they're likely to be hacked about by surgeons who are doing something for their own gratification. And if they've got mental disease, they've been frightened off having treatment with ECT or with pills. And this is a very dangerous thing to do, I think.
Brian Inglis, can I bring you in here? Can I have your general view of those films?
I'd like to answer Tony first. It seems to me that what the film got right was the fact that it is dangerous to go to hospital with something like cancer. And nobody knows better than you do, because it's appeared in your paper, that the amount of good which has been done by things like, say, radical mastectomy or by radiation is now realized to be practically nothing. There's been 100 years of wasting time on this.
Oh, come off it, Brian. We cure 1/3 of all cancers in this country, and the next third have of patients have their lives substantially lengthened, and only 1/3 of patients die quickly from their disease.
There's a myth, a total myth. However, we don't want to get involved in this thing. It seems to me that where the fault lies, and it's implied in the series but not actually brought out, is the fact that it's not the NHS which is wrong, it's the fact that the NHS is run by doctors, and they run things for their own benefit. So you will allow unions to be kicked, you will allow the administrators to be kicked or whatever, but you do not ever allow the people who are squandering the money on, say, drugs to be told, now you cannot prescribe these drugs because we know that they're not much use. Stop it or reduce it.
Brian, to quote you, you have once said that many patients are no longer prepared to accept conventional medicine as wise. Do you think that's really true?
Yes, in the last 5 years even, there's been an extraordinary changeover. People realize that drugs are not very useful for things, the kind of diseases of our time. And more they're switching to alternative medicine in the hope that they're going to find something which is rather better for them.
Dr. Smith, do you think there's a danger in encouraging alternative medicine at the moment?
I think there is a danger in allowing the belief to become current that alternative medicine can offer satisfactory treatment for the whole range of disease. We need to clearly draw a distinction between the many diseases that orthodox medicine, science-based, treats extremely effectively, and those diseases like, for example, chronic arthritis, for which orthodox medicine has less to offer and for which it can't offer a cure. I quite see that in a health service where someone with backache may have to wait 12 or 14 weeks to see a hospital specialist, it's entirely natural that that person will shop around and say, well, if someone else can offer me some sort of treatment next week, I'll go along and see what they can do. Right. And I think this is a very important part in the growth of alternative therapists at this moment.
Brian Inglis, a lot is said about the fact that there's no scientific evaluation, really, of alternative therapies. Do you think it is possible to evaluate them scientifically, as the BMA intends to do over the next 2 years?
They won't do it over the next 2 years, there's not a hope. The problem there has been the fact that for 20, 30 years, the British medical profession would not allow these trials. Now they say, oh, we want to do these trials, but we want to do them our way. We want to have trials, controlled trials, of a kind which you cannot do with manipulation. You can do controlled trials with drugs. You can give 1,000 people a drug and 1,000 people a placebo, a dummy, and see how it works out. But you can't give people dummy manipulation, dummy osteopathy. This is the problem of controlled trials.
I mean, do you think more alternative therapy should be available on the NHS, and should there be a register of some kind?
Yes, there should be a register of people doing alternative therapy who are on the NHS. Leave the people who don't want to join the NHS out, and let people who are qualified doing any particular type of alternative medicine, join if they wish.
Mm-hmm.
I'd like to say that I think there is a real danger of a pendulum swing at the moment. That this isn't just a British problem. I think it's very, very important to say that modern scientific medicine throughout industrialized countries is being questioned much more. I mean, the thalidomide tragedy, which was one of the triggering incidents, was an American one. It's an international sort of problem. I think it's very important for us to remember that on the whole, actually, in Britain and in the health service, we're less crazy about modern scientific medicine than countries such as the States. So that we have to see it in perspective, and we shouldn't sort of say, oh, all that's rubbish and rush away from it and not value it. We should be more critical about it, and we should be equally critical about alternative therapies.
In a word, we've nearly reached the end. Give me one good reason why we should protect our NHS.
One good reason, because it's basically sensible. It's aimed at caring for the sick and preventing illness, and it's a very lean, efficient way of doing it.
Thank you all very much indeed. Well, a special study guide has been prepared linked with the nation's health and with these programmes. We'll give you details about them after the programme. And that's all from us for this series. Good night.